For decades, the government spent millions of dollars to destroy them because they were labeled as a threat to fish survival. Yet, when they were gone, the fish didn't flourish. They vanished. We were told that beaver dams were nothing but blockades, physical walls stopping salmon from reaching their spawning grounds. But in a remote corner of Oregon, a radical experiment proved that everything we knew about river restoration was completely backward. In fact, a simple, low-tech structure that cost less than a used car just triggered a 168% increase in trout production. How can a physical obstacle actually be the key to saving an entire species? And why did we spend half a century fighting the very engineers that built the foundation of our water systems? The answers are hidden in the geology of the riverbed itself, and they are about to change how we view every stream on the planet. To understand this, we have to look at Bridge Creek, Oregon. It was here, starting in 2009, that researchers from Utah State and Noe Fisheries launched a massive watershed-scale experiment. The objective? To test if beaver dam analogs, or BDAs, could undo the damage of a century of industrial mismanagement. See, the problem wasn't the dams. The problem was the lack of them. For nearly 100 years, state fisheries managers operated under a rigid directive: remove the blockades. They believed that clear, fast-flowing water was the ideal environment for salmonids. They were wrong. By removing the dams, they stripped the land of its ability to hold water. They created a sterile, high-energy environment that flushed out the very nutrients the fish needed to survive. But wait, that is only the beginning of the catastrophe. What happens when you remove the natural sponge from a landscape? The answer reveals a terrifying reality about our current water crisis. The mid-20th century was a dark era for Western streams. Official management directives mandated the removal of beaver dams to facilitate migration. It was a well-intentioned policy based on a fundamental misunderstanding of river physics. As the dams were pulled, the stream energy shifted. Without the dams to slow the flow, the water gained incredible velocity. This caused channel incision, where the river literally eats its own bed, cutting deeper and deeper into the earth. Within decades, 30% to 50% of streams in the interior Columbia River Basin were stripped down to bedrock. They became disconnected from their floodplains. When the spring snowmelt arrived, the water didn't soak into the meadows. It roared through the channels like a fire hose. The result was a desiccated landscape where the water table dropped and the fish had nowhere to hide. This wasn't just an ecological shift, it was a total systemic failure. But in 1993, a biologist named Carol Evans looked at a dying creek in Nevada and decided to do the exact opposite of what the manual said. When Carol Evans stopped the livestock grazing at Susie Creek, she wasn't just letting the grass grow back, she was inviting the beavers to return to their ancestral home. Within 10 years, the water table rose by over 3 feet. But how? This is where the physics of the hyperheat exchange comes into play. A beaver dam is not just a pile of sticks, it is a complex hydraulic filter. It forces surface water into the shallow alluvial aquifers beneath the stream bed. As the water travels through these underground zones, it cools significantly. When it re-emerges downstream, it creates thermal refugia, patches of water that are 2 to 4 degrees Celsius cooler than the rest of the creek. During a summer heat wave, this temperature difference is the difference between life and death for juvenile trout. While traditional engineered restoration costs up to $500,000 per kilometer, these beaver-modeled structures cost under $1,500. We weren't just wasting money, we were paying to destroy the solution. And if you think this is just about some fish in a creek in Oregon, think again, because the implications for our global water security are massive. The turning point came in 2016. Dr. Nick Bowes and Dr. Michael Pollock published their landmark study in Scientific Reports. They showed that the BDAs at Bridge Creek didn't just help the fish, they created a boom. a 168% increase in juvenile steelhead production, a 52% increase in overall survival. The data was undeniable, but the implications went far deeper than just population numbers. Dr. Joseph Wheaton's 2008 research on shear stress explained exactly why the old ways were failing. In a damless, incise stream, the energy of a flood is concentrated. It creates shear stress levels exceeding 100 newtons per square meter. That is enough force to scour the gravel beds where fish lay their eggs, effectively killing the next generation before they even hatch. By adding BDAs, we dissipate that energy. We turn a destructive force into a gentle, life-sustaining flow. The question now isn't, should we use beavers? The question is, why are we still fighting them? We have the data, we have the proof, and yet the bureaucracy of the old management model is still the greatest barrier to fixing our broken watersheds. The future of our water isn't in a concrete dam or a massive, expensive pipeline. It is in the mud, the sticks, and the humble work of a rodent that has been doing this for millions of years. To understand why beaver dams are not just piles of sticks, but sophisticated hydraulic engines, we must look at the thermodynamics of the creek itself. In a degraded, incise stream, water behaves like a runaway freight train. It accelerates, it scours, it moves too fast to support life. But when you introduce a beaver dam analog, or BDA, you fundamentally alter the physics of the reach. Dr. Chris Jordan, a researcher with NOAA Fisheries, documented that these structures attenuate stream power by up to 60%. That is not a minor adjustment. It is a total systemic reset. By forcing the water to slow down, you trigger a chain reaction of geological recovery. As the velocity drops, the water loses its ability to carry sediment. It drops its load. In the Bridge Creek study, this resulted in the deposition of over half a meter of gravel back onto bare, scoured bedrock in just 5 years. Think about that. We are literally building the riverbed back up from nothing. But the mechanical benefits go deeper than just sediment. Look at the water temperature. In the summer heat, shallow water is a death trap for salmonids, pushing temperatures toward the 25°C mark, the critical thermal maximum. But beavers change the math. By creating deep pool stratification, they tap into the hyperheic flow, the water moving through the gravel beneath the stream bed. This water is filtered, cooled, and returned to the channel at a consistent 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. It is nature's own air conditioning. Beyond the thermal regulation, there is the biological explosion. In these slow-moving impoundments, the channel shifts from a sterile, high-energy corridor into a rich, lentic-lotic mosaic. This is an engine for life. The biomass of benthic macroinvertebrates, the larvae and insects that juvenile salmon eat, increased by over 300%. The data from Bridge Creek is definitive. The dams increased stream stage height by up to 1.2 meters, expanding the total surface water inundation and floodplain connectivity by more than 200% across an 11-kilometer reach. We aren't just talking about a few more fish. We are talking about the total restoration of a broken ecosystem. The physics of the beaver dam forces the water to stay, to cool, and to feed the land. Yet, despite this clear, empirical evidence of success, the human response to these engineers has been one of systematic, bureaucratic warfare. If the science is so clear, why did we spend decades trying to destroy these dams? The answer lies in a combination of bad data and rigid, outdated regulation. For years, the scientific community operated under a dogma, a belief that beaver dams were inherently bad for fish. This wasn't based on a comprehensive study of watershed health, but on a misinterpretation of a 1998 study. Researchers observed localized drops in dissolved oxygen levels in stagnant isolated pools, dropping below 5 milligrams per liter, and concluded that the dams were suffocating salmon. They saw a single data point and missed the entire system. They ignored the fact that these pools were often disconnected from the main flow. They ignored the hyperhelic exchange. They simply saw a low oxygen reading and blamed the beaver. This myth became institutionalized. In Oregon, this led to a regulatory framework that was, for all intents and purposes, a declaration of war against the species. Under Oregon Revised Statute 610.002, beavers on private land were classified as predatory animals. This allowed for unrestricted, lethal trapping. While the state was officially funding salmon restoration programs, it was simultaneously allowing the systematic removal of the very creatures that were proven to increase salmon survival. It was a contradiction that crippled our watersheds. The USGS records tell the tragic story of this period. Between 1980 and 2010, summer base flows in Columbia Basin tributaries dropped by 20 to 40%. We were losing our water, and we were killing the only engineers capable of slowing the loss. Even when restoration experts began to catch on, the bureaucracy fought back. In 2012, early projects attempting to install low-tech BDAs hit a wall of red tape. Regulatory bodies, trained to view any intervention in a waterway as a threat, treated these simple wooden post structures as non-compliant artificial fill. They demanded industrial engineering permits for projects that were meant to mimic natural processes. We were forcing people to treat a pile of sticks like a concrete dam. It was a failure of imagination and a failure of policy. We were so committed to the idea of human control over the environment that we refused to let the environment control itself. We were drowning in our own regulations, watching our streams dry up, while the solution was swimming right in front of us. And as we look at the wreckage of these policies, we begin to see the true cost of our arrogance. A cost that is measured not just in dollars, but in the very foundation of our water security. The pivot point arrived not with a massive government contract, but with a pile of sticks and a shift in perspective. In 2019, Dr. Joseph Wheaton and his team at Utah State University codified what they called low-tech process-based restoration, or LTPBR. This was not high-level engineering. It was a return to the basics of hydrology. They developed a standardized design manual that transformed the way we view stream intervention. Instead of massive, expensive concrete barriers, they utilized untreated wooden posts, driven into the streambed using handheld pneumatic drivers, then woven with native willow branches. It was elegant, it was cheap, and it was highly effective. This method mimicked the natural behavior of beavers, creating small, permeable structures that slowed water flow without stopping it entirely. But how do you prove these simple structures actually work? That was the challenge until Dr. Emily Fairfax stepped in. She utilized automated Google Earth Engine algorithms to analyze the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, or NDVI. By tracking this data, she could quantify the spatial moisture retention around beaver complexes, even during the harshest drought conditions. The results were undeniable. Look at Idaho's Birch Creek. For 40 years, the channel ran dry every single summer. It was a dead zone. Then, they deployed 120 of these beaver dam analogs. The result? The creek restored year-round surface flow to a 3-mile section of the channel. The Bonneville cutthroat trout returned. The water stayed. The ecosystem reconnected. It was a massive victory for common sense. The data proved that we did not need to fight the environment. We only needed to provide the tools for the environment to fix itself. By 2020, the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service took notice. They incorporated these protocols into the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP. They put federal money behind the science, allocating funds across 13 western states. This was the moment the tide turned. We stopped viewing the beaver as a nuisance and started seeing it as a critical infrastructure asset. We stopped trying to build our way out of water scarcity and started letting the water stay where it belongs, in the soil, in the pools, and in the reaches that we had spent a century drying out. The technology was not a new invention. It was an ancient process, finally granted the scientific validation it deserved. The impact of this shift moved far beyond local creek restoration. It became a matter of national security and economic stability. Consider the wildfire crisis. In 2020, Dr. Emily Fairfax published a study in Ecological Applications that examined major western wildfires, including the 2018 Sharps Fire in Idaho. The evidence was striking. Beaver-maintained riparian corridors were 3 times more resistant to fire burning than non-beaver reaches. These corridors acted as literal fire breaks, wet sponges of vegetation that stopped the blaze in its tracks. We are talking about natural fire defense systems that cost almost nothing to maintain. The economics are equally compelling. A 2020 resource economics study calculated that re-establishing beaver complexes across North American headwaters generates up to $69,000 per square kilometer annually. This includes the value of water purification, flood mitigation, and massive carbon storage. This is not just environmentalism, this is sound fiscal policy. Governments are finally catching up. In 2023, the Oregon State Legislature passed House Bill 2841. They removed the predatory animal designation for beavers on public lands, granting the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife full regulatory authority to protect the population. This is a seismic shift in how we value a species that was once trapped to near extinction. And the influence is international. The UK Environment Agency conducted a 5-year river otter beaver trial in Devon between 2015 and 2020. Their findings proved that beaver dams reduced peak flood flows downstream by up to 30% during heavy storm events. Think about that. 30% less flood risk for downstream communities, achieved entirely through natural engineering. We are looking at a global realization that our traditional water management strategies have been fundamentally flawed. By forcing water through rigid pipes and concrete channels, we created a system that is brittle, expensive, and dangerous. By restoring the beaver, we are building a system that is resilient, self-healing, and remarkably efficient. We have moved from a philosophy of control to a philosophy of partnership. But this is only the beginning of the story. As these wetlands expand, we are beginning to see the true power of this restoration, which brings us to the question of what happens when we scale this model to the entire continent. As we cast our gaze toward the horizon of the next century, we must reconcile with a sobering reality projected by the IPCC and the USGS. Climate modeling indicates that the snowpack in the western United States is slated to decline by 40 to 60% by the year 2100. For decades, our civilization relied on these mountains as nature's water tower, storing water as ice to be released slowly throughout the summer. As that storage mechanism vanishes, we are left with a critical deficit. But here is the pivot. Beaver-managed alluvial aquifers offer a biological solution to a mechanical problem. By slowing water down and encouraging it to infiltrate the ground, beavers create natural subsurface storage that acts as an underground reservoir. This is not just a theoretical capacity. We are talking about billions of gallons of water that would otherwise rush out to sea, now trapped within the soil, ready to sustain life through the hottest months of the coming century. This transition represents a fundamental shift in infrastructure philosophy. Currently, we treat stream restoration as a capital expenditure, a one-time construction project that inevitably degrades. Integrating beavers converts these systems into low-entropy, self-sustaining hydrologic feedback loops. We stop fighting the physics of a river and start working with them. Furthermore, the carbon implications are profound. Research led by Dr. Ellen Wohl at Colorado State University reveals that active beaver meadows sequester up to 8% of the total organic carbon within a watershed. By keeping sediments saturated and anaerobic, these meadows prevent the oxidation of carbon that occurs in dry, degraded landscapes. We aren't just saving fish, we are managing the carbon cycle on a regional scale. When we look at the biodiversity multiplier, the data is unequivocal. Long-term monitoring shows that beaver-engineered aquatic networks increase regional landscape species richness by 33%. From the Columbia spotted frog to the most sensitive salmonid populations, the beaver is the architect of a resilient future. We are moving away from the era of brittle, expensive, and failing human-made infrastructure and into an age where our greatest engineering partners are the ones that have been here for millions of years, quietly waiting for us to stop obstructing their work. We began this journey by asking why everyone claimed beaver dams killed fish, when the reality on the ground proved the exact opposite. We have seen the evidence, from the trout-filled creeks of the Pacific Northwest to the flood-resilient valleys of the UK, the data is clear. Beaver dams do not kill fish. They create the complex, deep pool, high-nutrient habitats that salmonids need to thrive. They do not destroy water quality, they filter it, cool it, and store it. The mystery was never about the beaver, it was about our own misunderstanding of how a healthy ecosystem functions. We were looking at a living, breathing, self-correcting machine and calling it a nuisance. If this documentary changed the way you see the water in your own backyard, hit the subscribe button and share this video with your local watershed council. The beavers have already started the work. It is time for us to catch up.